Now, on the Georgia vote.
Congratulations, you are Morehouse men. God love you.
President Joe Biden speaking this morning to graduates at Morehouse College. More on his remarks and the backlash only 2 days before our primary. Also,
the road to the White House runs through Georgia, and so, it's playing out.
Governor Brian Kemp looking to play an active role this campaign season. In an interview you'll only see on 11 Alive, hear how he looks to flip Georgia back into the GOP column. And conservative radio host Shelley Winter and Cobb County Democratic Party acting chair Essence Johnson joining our roundtable to break down this busy week. All next on the Georgia Vote. Well, good morning and welcome to the Georgia Vote. It's been a very busy weekend in state politics. We're so glad you're here. I'm Faith Jesse.
And I'm Zach Merchant. The race for the White House once again top of mind in the critical battleground state we call home, with President Biden returning to Georgia to deliver the commencement address at Morehouse College. The event marks a chance for the president to connect with a key audience for his re-election campaign. In his remarks, the president saluted the historically black college and university's graduating class and argued his connection to black Americans has always been strong.
Faith asks you to hold on to hope, to move heaven and earth, to make better days. Well, that's my commitment to you, to show you democracy, democracy, democracy is still the way.
While President Biden spoke, a group of protesters marched along the streets close to campus. Many in the crowd called out the president over his staunch support for Israel in its war against Hamas militants in Gaza. The president addressed the conflict in his speech, arguing that his plan is the right one for peace in the region.
Because the question is, and you see what's going on in Israel today, what after? What after Hamas? What happens then? What happens in Gaza? What rights do the Palestinian people have? I'm working to make sure we finally get a two-state solution, the only solution, for two people who live in peace, security, and dignity.
As for the president's chief rival, former President Donald Trump, South Carolina Republican Senator Tim Scott said of the campaigning this weekend, quote, Joe Biden is on a pandering tour because he knows what we all know. Without the black vote, there is no Democrat Party. And now let's get back out to Morehouse College, where Doug Richards with the 11 Alive Politics team got to see the president's speech up close. Doug, you've covered campaigns in Georgia for a long time. What stood out to you today?
To present the candidates for the Bachelor of Arts.
The reaction to President Biden's remarks here at Morehouse College was probably somewhere on the continuum between warm and lukewarm, with substantial enthusiastic pockets of folks who shouted for more years in unison relating to Biden's re-election prospects in 2024. They were short bursts of enthusiasm that were mostly drowned out by silence from the rest of the crowd. Biden certainly got some warm reception when he talked about how there needed to be a ceasefire in Gaza. Probably the thing that got the most applause here was when he talked about how his administration has been trying to cancel student debt. And the students themselves, of course, were responsive in a positive way during that portion of the speech. And then went on, talked about his biography and talked about his large presence of African-American folks in the White House. And then he went on, and the thing is wrapping up now.
Doug Richards at Morehouse College. Thank you, Doug. Today's Morehouse speech capped a full weekend in town for the president. He arrived Saturday and made a campaign stop at Mary Mac's Tea Room on Ponce. There, he sought to downplay recent polls that show him trailing former President Donald Trump in Georgia and shift the focus to what he argues a second Trump presidency would look like.
Our democracy is really on the line. Listen to the things he said. They asked him what happens. He's going to accept the loss. He said it depends. And then he said if he loses, it's going to be a bloodbath.
President Biden was also the guest of honor Saturday night at a big dollar fundraiser hosted by Falcons owner Arthur Blank.
Well, a sharp jolt to Georgia presidential politics this week with word that the first presidential debate between Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump will be next month. It'll take place right here in Atlanta. And this Peach State showdown will be unique in that it comes well before either candidate becomes his party's official nominee at the summer conventions. The arrangement between the Biden and Trump campaigns also sidelines the Commission on Presidential Debates. This is the nonpartisan group which organized them for more than 3 decades. And political experts say this is just the latest twist in what is shaping up to be a historic showdown.
Voters don't have to wonder what it would be like if there's a Trump presidency or a Biden presidency. They've experienced both, but now the candidates are going to be able to put that context clearly before voters, and I think that's really important.
Well, I think it's going to be a very specific, persuadable message from both candidates. And so they'll definitely say things to throw red meat to their base, but I think they got to look in the camera and tell those moderate, independent, undecided voters why they should either continue to be president or be reelected as a president again.
Okay, so here's what we know so far about these debates. The first one taking place June 27th. CNN will host it at the network's Techwood studios. No live audience here. CNN anchors Jake Tapper and Dana Bash will moderate this debate. The only other debate agreed upon so far, that's going down September 10th. ABC will televise this. No details yet on where that debate will take place or its format. Now, while Georgia's Democrats rallied around President Biden in Atlanta, the state's Republican Party held its annual convention in Columbus. And we were in the Fountain City for the first day. Republicans tell 11 Alive they feel like they've rebounded in Georgia. Former President Donald Trump, he spoke at last year's convention, weeks before his indictment in Fulton County on election interference charges. Now, he was not on the agenda this weekend, but among the takeaways from this event, Georgia Republicans tapped Amy Kramer for one of 2 seats to the Republican National Committee. The conservative activist, she helped to organize the January 6th pro-Trump rally that led to a mob storming the U.S. Capitol.
And still ahead, Governor Brian Kemp joins us for a one-on-one interview that you will see only on 11 Alive. Fresh off a packed legislative session, we'll hear how he's now shifting his focus towards a presidential election, which will put Georgia right back under a very bright national spotlight.
And later, we head to DeKalb County and hear how one woman is looking forward to casting her vote for president, her first vote for president. She'll share what's important to her as she considers her ballot. This is the Georgia Vote. This weekend's visit to Atlanta by President Biden is the latest sign Georgia may once again decide who occupies the White House for the next 4 years. That means the state's Republican governor, Brian Kemp, he will be in the thick of this campaign season. In an interview you'll only see right here on 11 Alive, I talked to the governor one-on-one about this already wild election year, beginning with the first planned presidential debate.
I want to ask you about some news that came down recently. President Biden and President Trump, they have agreed to debate. The first debate happening here in Atlanta. What's your reaction from the news?
Hey, look, I've been saying for months, almost a year now, the road to the White House runs through Georgia. And so, you know, it's playing out. I don't think it's, I mean, it was kind of shocking to see that they actually both agreed to a debate that quickly. I think it's a great opportunity, as I've been saying, for Republicans and for President Trump to make the case of why people should vote for him. You know, looking to the future, telling people what, you know, what he's for, what he and the team are going to do for the country. I think there's an ability to really contrast that with President Biden, and I hope that's what he does.
I know that you said you hope that he makes the case of why people should vote for him. Would you go as far to endorse President Trump for president? Well,
I've said I'm supporting the ticket. You know, and I'm going to continue to do that. We're building a ground game and raising money right now to help everybody from, you know, like Justice Andrew Pinson in the May primary to a lot of legislators that we're supporting in the primary will do the same thing in the general election and turning out the vote. And that is going to help our whole ticket all the way up to the top in the presidential race.
You touched on this, but if you could expand, what exactly does your role look like? And I want to preface this by saying in 2020, when you put your foot down here at the election, you were the center of a lot of attacks from the former president, from people of your own party, even some voters. Some people did stick beside you, though, right? But given that history, what does your role look like in helping to get Trump elected, or is it more focused on the Republican Party?
Yeah, look, I'm a team player. The American people have picked what the teams look like. We'll see who actually gets on the presidential ballot here in Georgia and around the rest of the country, whether it's, just Joe Biden and Donald Trump, or whether we're going to have third-party candidates and others that are on the ballot. But, for the most part, the field's set. So Americans and Georgians have a choice to make. And I am going to support the Republican ticket from the bottom of the ticket all the way up to the top. And I've had people ask me, why are you going to vote for somebody that was so mad at you and said so many bad things about you? And I just simply said, because I think they'd be a better president than Joe Biden's been.
I want to ask you quickly here about Trump's legal issues. I know in the past you've said that they've been a distraction. Here in Fulton County, do you think the district attorney, Fani Willis, prosecuting Donald Trump is doing her job, or do you think that's a distraction?
Well, look, I wouldn't be able to answer, the mindset on being a prosecutor and why she's taken actions and why she hasn't. I would just say, and look, I've been subpoenaed in that case. I got to be very careful about what I'm saying because I may be called to testify at some point. But I will say a lot of people, including myself, think it's been very politically motivated on how that has played out. And I think that's certainly the case in New York and potentially some of the other cases. And I think the Democrats, quite honestly, have overplayed their hand by waiting so long. It looked political. Some of the things that are playing out on the TV every day look political. But, I can't begin to, assume what's going to happen, what the juries are going to decide. I said a long time ago, I didn't think most of these cases would happen before the election. Obviously, the New York case is, but I don't know that another one will. And I think, quite honestly, at this point, as political as it's been and as late in the process as it's been, it's probably best to let the American people weigh in and decide, who they want to be their next president, which I think will send a signal about what they think about these cases.
One thing Republicans have really said since that 2020 election, they've been focusing on election integrity. We had two bills that passed recently. SB 189 recently passed in this last session, SB 202. And I asked him, why were they needed if you put your foot down? He said, you know what, that is what the legislature wanted to do, and that's how it works. So that's how I signed it. So you can watch more of that on 11alive.com, that full conversation.
Well, yes, you can. But first, we break down the president's weekend in Atlanta and Governor Kemp's interview with Cobb County Democratic Party Acting Chair Essence Johnson and conservative radio host Shelley Winter in our political roundtable. You're watching The Georgia Vote. Welcome back. It is time now for our political roundtable, and today we have Essence Johnson, currently the acting chair of the Cobb County Democratic Party. She serves as vice president of operations at Atlanta-based Intellectual Concepts and vice chair on the board of directors at the Environmental Equity Information Institute. And also joining us is Shelley Winter, conservative talk radio show host, heard weeknights from 7 to 10 on WSB Radio, and a member of the Georgia Black Republican Council. Let's start with this. We just saw Faith's interview with Governor Kemp. I want to ask each of you this. What do you think Governor Kemp's role in this election will be? In essence, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to come on. I think what the GOP does best is making sure that they're a united front. And Kemp will, of course, continue to ensure that the ticket for the Republican Party gets pushed, supported, funded, and to get their initiatives and their goals across the finish line.
Shelley, what do you think?
Brian Kemp is one of the best one of the best governors we've ever had. He's going to do what's necessary for Republicans to win in Georgia. One of the most important things he had to do when he was running a second term was to kind of separate his fundraising from the Georgia GOP. Georgia GOP is spending money to defend some of the people on trial here in the Georgia election case, so it can't raise as much money as it needs to. I think some of the decisions on some of the elected, the committee woman that was just elected, Amy Kramer, is going to hinder some of the fundraising efforts for the Georgia GOP. So I think Brian Kemp's going to raise millions of dollars. He's able to. He's done it statewide before, and we need that to happen.
We just heard from President Joe Biden giving the commencement at Morehouse College. It was a speech to not just black people, but specifically to black men. Tim Scott has called this out and Biden's actions as pandering, just saying what black people want to hear to get their vote. Essence, is this pandering?
No, I don't think it's pandering. I think that the Democratic Party realizes that we need to have a universal party. We are the party of the people. And his response and talking and engaging with the Morehouse men, one, congratulations on graduating, but also we know how important the black men are to ensure that we protect democracy. So I don't call it pandering, I call it what politicians do. They know that we have to reach people. We have to reach people where they're at, and we have to be able to speak to what they want and need.
Shelley, I want to turn to you here. We've seen some polling. The New York Times recently released a poll that showed President Biden trailing former President Trump here in Georgia. But the former president also has some challenges here in the state, particularly when it comes to the Fulton County election interference case. If that case makes it to trial, do you think that that event could narrow the gap between these two candidates?
Absolutely not. I think what it does is it martyrs President Kemp. The Democrats have overplayed their hand in every case that they've had, that they've thrown at the president, and what they're seeing is his numbers going up as these cases process through. So if the Fulton County case continues on and goes to a jury during this process before November, it only martyrs him, and it only bands together a quite honestly Georgia GOP that's kind of split and kind of having a lot of infighting going on. It brings them all together. So I think it's the worst thing for DA Fani Willis to do if she beats Courtney Kramer in the general election in November. I think it's the worst thing for her to do to bring this case to a jury trial.
Essence, do you agree with that?
No, I don't. I think that the GOP, of course, is doing their antics. I mean, they're up to it. They're doing it in my own county, in Cobb County. I think that the way that the trial is happening, it's happening as it is. We've already seen that, with everything that went on with DA Fani Willis and everything that's going on throughout the state of Georgia, that the GOP is trying so hard to deviate from anything that has any reflection on them. We see it within election interference. I deal with it in my own county, from qualifying candidates that are not in the district, legally not in the district, and putting them through, to where you deal with the new law of voting challenges, the ballots not being out, the home rule map. I was in a part of appeal right now that was dealing with the home rule map for the Cobb County Commissioner District. They actually cited and put a elector who civic duty of challenging someone that qualified and added her on as a defendant. The GOP is up to their antics. They're trying to do scare tactics.
And I want to just on that point to both of you, some of those points that you brought up, those will be brought up during the presidential debate that's happening here in Atlanta. Just quickly from both of you, what do you think, how is this going to prove, what is this roadmap going to set for the rest of the election here in Atlanta?
I think it'll give people an early chance to really hear from both candidates. Because at the end of the day, again, I'm the acting chair of the Cobb Democrats. So as Democrats, I want people to be able to hear, hopefully submit tough questions to President Biden and really understand what is his plan. There's a lot going on throughout the entire state, throughout the entire country.
And we want to make sure, and I'm sorry, we don't have much time. Shelley wants you to get in on this as well.
The roadmap, you mean the debate? Debate
Yes.
roadmap is that you have a clear indication of what happened to your life under Joe Biden, what happened under your life under President Trump. That's it. That's what people are going to see. And Trump needs to hammer Joe Biden not on his last 4 years, but on the previous 46 years in office. Because this man has been in politics, as he said at this Morehouse ceremony, for almost 50 years.
Absolutely.
So President Trump needs to talk about the crime bill. He needs to talk about the relationship with Robert Byrd and tell these, what President Biden just told these African-American men with a straight face, that white supremacy is a greater threat when he passed a law that locked their fathers and uncles up.
Well, on that point, guys, we want to talk to you all so much more. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you so much for weighing in on these topics.
That's right. And up next, our voice of the voter examines how one woman is making her choice as she prepares to cast a ballot for the first time. But you cannot have the Georgia vote without Georgia voters.
That's right. And this is why we are going to where you are to find out what will guide your vote this year. So this morning, we take you to Clarkston in DeKalb County, and we learn how one woman will be casting her ballot for the very first time.
A lot of people seek refuge to a place in which they can protect and value their life. We are at FREE, which is Friends of Refugees of Education and Empowerment in Clarkston, Georgia. We try to cater to the different people that are here in this community.
I noticed some books here, a lot of children's books.
One of the reasons is so that the kids can have access to reading texts that are written in English, as most of their parents come here to the country and they don't know English. So right here, this is my home back in Zimbabwe. This is my dad and my mom, and that's me in her belly right there. So I moved to the States when I was 10 years old, and I've been living in Covington and went to Georgia State. And so I've been here, I think it's 16 or so years now. And I've been living as a permanent resident, and thankfully my family wanted to help me to become an official citizen.
How do you feel that you get to vote for the very first time after you said 16 years?
It feels really liberating and exciting. Voting means you have a voice, and I can have the choice to also really share, how we want to build this country.
Looking ahead at this election, what are some of your biggest concerns?
Improving the education system and the literacy rates within our community. But I'm really concerned also with the safety of our youths when we're raising our voices for peace and for justice.
What are some of those policies that catch your attention?
I'm looking at the candidates and the leaders, those who are more hands-on within the community, those who understand what is taking place even within the refugee communities, because I really believe in the term seeing is believing. Because once you see what people are going through, then how you make policies would be different.
We always like to end on a positive note. So what are you most optimistic about?
Seeing how the youth are uniting together these days. I'm really excited that our country is moving forward in that way, and I'm hopeful that would really foster more of that collaboration and dialogue so that we can really build a country that is inclusive and really catering to everyone's needs.
One thing she said is that those who want her vote, she wants to see them active in the community all the time, not just right before the election. She said, show me what you can do for me.
Young voters going to be pivotal. And on that note, we need to thank you, young and old voters, for watching us today.
We hope to see you back here next Sunday for another edition of the Georgia Vote.